The storm had already swallowed Wilmington when a deputy found a 10-year-old girl crouched beside a broken cage whispering to a dying German Shepherd pup she refused to leave behind. What happened next would turn a soldier's guilt, a child's grief, and a trembling dog's fear into the kind of miracle you only see once. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and if you believe no one human or animal should ever be left behind, hit like and subscribe. By late afternoon, the storm had passed over Wilmington, leaving behind a silence so deep it seemed to hum. The air was heavy with salt and pine, and the streets glistened with rainwater that mirrored the gray Carolina sky. Deputy Jack Carter, once a Marine, guided his county cruiser down a road littered with debris, roof shingles, broken branches, a child's shoe half buried in the mud. The neighborhood looked hollowed out, its houses leaning under the weight of what they'd survived. Jack parked and stepped out, scanning with the instinct of a soldier, windows, shadows, sound. Somewhere faintly he heard metal scraping wood. He followed the noise to a collapsed shed behind a house. The door hung loose, creaking when the wind breathed. Inside, huddled against a broken beam, was a little girl. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her face streaked with dirt, her bare feet caked in mud. In her hands, she clutched a torn leash, the frayed end tight in her small fist. She didn't look up, only stared at the wall as if the storm were still raging behind her eyes. "Hey there," Jack said quietly, his voice low and even. "I'm with the sheriff's office. You hurt." The girl's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't answer. He crouched, keeping a distance. "You got anyone here? Mom? Dad?" After a pause, she whispered, "No." Just one syllable, fragile as breath. "Okay," he said. "Let's get you out of here. You'll be warmer outside." Her fingers tightened on the leash. Jack followed her gaze to the floor, understanding. "Who's that belong to?" he asked. "My dog," she murmured. "He ran away when it got loud." "We'll find him," Jack promised. "What's your name?" "Lily," she said. "Lily Adams." "Good name," he said softly. He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and led her out into the gray evening. The storm had left the world washed pale, the air thick with the smell of rain and river mud. Lily's hand clutched the leash like it was the last piece of her world that hadn't blown away. Jack knelt beside the muddy ground, eyes tracing small paw prints leading through a gap in the fence. "These, his..." She nodded, eyes wide. "He's just a puppy." "Then we'd better hurry," Jack said. They followed the trail through puddles until he spotted a patch of black and tan beneath a bent willow. A German Shepherd pup lay motionless, ribs rising in small, unsteady breaths. Jack lifted a hand to stop Lily and moved closer, crouching slowly. "Hey, buddy," he said, tone calm and low. "Long night, huh?" The pup flinched but didn't move. Its hind leg twisted wrong fur, caked with mud. Jack set a water bottle cap on the ground, pouring a little water in. "Here you go," he said. "Just a sip." The pup sniffed the air but stayed still. Lily whispered, "Shadow." The name drifted across the distance. The pup's ears twitched. Jack looked back. "That his name?" She nodded. "Daddy named him." Jack smiled faintly. "Good name. Fits him." He inched closer, spreading his open hands in the mud. "Shadow." He murmured the word, gentle, rhythmic, as if calling a memory instead of a dog. The pup's nose twitched again. Then he crawled an inch toward the sound. Lily crouched beside Jack, whispering, "It's me, Shadow." Slowly, the little dog dragged himself forward until his nose touched Jack's jacket sleeve, then stopped shivering. "That's it," Jack said, voice barely a whisper. "You're safe now." He slipped a soft loop of lead around Shadow's neck, loose as trust beginning to form. The pup didn't resist. Jack gathered the small, trembling body into his arms, careful with the injured leg. Lily's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "He's cold," she said. "So are you," Jack replied. "Let's fix that." They walked back through the ruins, one man, one girl, and one muddy dog between them. Jack placed the puppy in a fleece-lined crate on the back seat of the cruiser. Lily climbed in beside it, resting her small hand on the pup's back. The engine hummed to life headlights cutting through the misty dusk. "We'll get him checked out," Jack said. "And we'll find you a place to rest." Rain began again, soft, harmless, a rhythm against the roof. In the mirror, Lily's head rested against the crate as the puppy's eyes fluttered closed, finally safe enough to sleep. Jack turned toward town, the broken road gleaming under his headlights. The storm had done its worst. What came next would be quieter, harder, but full of small mercies waiting to be earned. The rain eased into mist by the time Jack pulled into the gravel lot of Paw Haven Rescue Center, a small facility tucked behind rows of pine trees on the city's edge. The building's lights glowed soft through the fog gold against the gray. Jack stepped out first, his boots crunching on the gravel, then helped Lily down from the cruiser. She still held the frayed leash in her fist, unwilling to let go. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet fur. Behind the front desk stood Dr. Leah Jensen, the shelter's lead veterinarian, her hair pulled back neatly, glasses slipping down her nose. She looked up as they entered. "Late-night rescue?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Storm victim. Found her in a collapsed shed." Pup's injured scared out of his mind. He opened the crate door gently. Shadow lay curled in the corner, trembling, his eyes wide and clouded. Leah crouched beside the crate, speaking softly. "Hey there, sweetheart." The pup flinched, pressing himself deeper into the blanket. His breaths came shallow and fast. "Trauma response," she murmured. "He's terrified. Might lash out if cornered." Jack nodded. "He's young, but he's seen enough." He knelt, lowering his voice. "Easy now, Shadow. You're safe." The dog's ears flicked at the sound, and his body stilled, not calm, not yet, but listening. Leah glanced at Jack. "He knows your voice." "Maybe," Jack said quietly. "Maybe he just knows I mean it." She smiled faintly and gestured toward a side corridor. "Let's get him into quarantine, just for the night." They moved through a narrow hallway lined with kennels, the air humming with low, nervous whines. Leah opened a small pen at the end, fresh bedding laid neatly inside. When Jack set the crate down and unlatched the door, Shadow didn't move. Lily crouched beside him, whispering, "It's okay, Shadow. I'm right here." Slowly, the pup crept forward, keeping his belly to the ground until he reached the blanket. He didn't look at Leah or Jack, only at Lily's hands resting still and open. Jack stayed silent, letting the moment build its own language. Leah scribbled notes on her clipboard. "He'll need antibiotics for that leg, maybe mild sedation. We'll start tomorrow morning." She glanced at Lily. "You did the right thing staying with him." Lily didn't answer. Her eyes never left Shadow. When Leah stood, she looked at Jack. "She should come with me. We have a volunteer dorm she can stay in tonight." But Lily shook her head, a quiet defiance in her small frame. "I'm not leaving him," she said. "He gets scared when I go." Leah sighed. "Sweetheart, he'll be fine. We just need to know." Lily said, her voice trembling but firm. "If he stays, I stay." Jack watched the exchange, recognizing that kind of loyalty, the kind you learn when everything else has fallen apart. He rubbed the back of his neck, choosing his words carefully. "Doc, maybe she can stay a little while. Just until he settles." Leah frowned. "That's not procedure. Liability issues." "Then I'll take responsibility," Jack said. "I'll sign whatever you need." She studied him for a long moment, reading the weight in his expression, the exhaustion behind his steadiness. "You sure about that, deputy?" He nodded. "I've handled worse." Leah hesitated, then pushed her glasses up and exhaled. All right, but she stays in the observation room, not the kennel area. Lily's eyes softened with relief. Thank you, she whispered. Jack filled out the forms at the front desk, the pen scratching across paper. Name, contact, liability, waiver, guardian, consent. He paused at the last line, responsible party, Jack Carter. He signed and slid the clipboard back. Leia took it, her expression half professional, half sympathetic. He'll probably have nightmares, she warned. So will she, Jack said quietly, but they'll have company. In the observation room, a small couch sat against the wall beside a viewing window that looked into the quarantine bay. Jack draped a blanket over Lily's shoulders and handed her a cup of warm cocoa from the vending machine. She sat cross-legged, eyes fixed on the window where Shadow lay curled. He looks so small, she whispered. Jack leaned against the doorway. He'll grow into his name. You think he'll be okay? Yeah, Jack said after a pause. He's got someone to fight for now. When Lily finally fell asleep, the empty cup beside her, Jack stayed a while longer, watching through the glass. Shadow stirred once, restless, then stilled again when Jack spoke softly through the intercom. Rest easy, buddy. You're home for the night. The dog's ears flicked, then his breathing evened out. Leia passed behind him, whispering, He responds to your tone. Maybe you should come by tomorrow for the med check. I will, Jack said. She'll need me to. Leia gave a small nod. So will he. Outside, the mist thickened into a fine drizzle. Jack stood under the shelter's porch, staring out into the fog that blurred the edges of the world. Inside, 2 lives had begun to anchor to his. He could feel it, the quiet pull of responsibility, the kind that doesn't ask, but stays. He reached into his pocket, touched the badge there, then the dog tag he still carried from another life. Both were cold. Both meant duty, but only one felt like redemption. As he walked back to his cruiser, the shelter light glowed warm against the dark. Behind it, a little girl and a wounded pup slept under the same roof, their breathing finding rhythm in the still night. The next morning dawned quiet over Paw Haven light, sifting through fog and pine needles. The smell of wet hay and bleach hung in the air, familiar and oddly comforting. Jack Carter returned before sunrise, coffee in hand, his uniform still damp at the cuffs from the drive. Inside, he found Lily sitting cross-legged near the quarantine window, chin on her knees, eyes fixed on Shadow's kennel. The pup slept curled in a tight ball, his breathing slow but steady. When she noticed Jack, she managed a small, tired smile. He didn't make a sound all night, she said softly. That's a good sign, Jack replied. Means he's learning you're here. He leaned against the wall beside her. You sleep. A little, she murmured. I had a dream Dad came back. He was calling Shadow, but not the dog. He was calling me. Jack hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Shadow's a strong name. How'd you pick it? Lily's fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. My dad used to call me that when I was little, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He said I followed him everywhere like a shadow. She looked away. After he left for deployment, Mom said he'd always have one with him, even over there. Then, he didn't come back. Jack's throat tightened. He was a Marine. Yes, Lily said. Tom Adams. He was stationed overseas. They said there was an explosion. Mom stopped talking about it after the funeral. She passed away last winter. The words landed gently but heavy like rain on tin. Jack nodded slowly, his chest tightening with something between grief and recognition. He must have been proud of you. He loved dogs, Lily whispered. Said they never ask for more than you can give. Shadow stirred, then lifting his head slightly, eyes blinking open. The moment broke softly. Jack pushed off the wall and smiled. Sounds like your dad knew a few things. Later that morning, Dr. Sarah Nolan arrived, her long coat dusted with raindrops. She nodded to Jack and Lily as she entered the exam room. "Morning. Let's see how our boy's leg is doing." She lifted Shadow gently onto the metal table, speaking in calm, measured tones. "You're all right, buddy. Just checking the tech work." Jack watched from the corner, arms folded, while Lily stood on tiptoe to see. Sarah scanned the small microchip beneath the puppy's skin. The reader beeped, then flickered with data. Her brow furrowed. "That's interesting," she murmured. Jack stepped closer. "Something wrong?" "No," she said slowly. "Just unexpected." She adjusted her glasses, reading the screen again. This microchip was registered to a military K-9 unit. The code prefix belongs to the U.S. Marine Corps. Jack blinked. That can't be right. Sarah rotated the screen toward him. Serial number matches a service animal from Camp Lejeune. The mother's name was Scout, German Shepherd trained for search and rescue. Jack's heart stumbled once, then steadied. The name rang somewhere deep in his memory. "Scout," he repeated quietly. Sarah nodded. She was retired last year and sent to a handler's family for care. If this pup came from her litter, it must have been soon after. She paused. "You said the girl's father was a Marine, Tom Adams," Jack said, glancing toward Lily, who was stroking Shadow's ear absently. "Do you think—" Sarah exhaled. "Scout was deployed twice with the 2nd Marine Division. I can check records, but if Tom Adams served in that unit—" "He did," Lily interrupted softly. They turned to her. She stood still, voice trembling but sure. "I remember his uniform patch, the number 2 and the crossed rifles." Sarah exchanged a glance with Jack. "Then this dog's mother served alongside your father, Lily." The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light. Lily's eyes filled confusion mixing with awe. "So, Shadow's from Dad's dog." Sarah nodded gently. "Looks that way." Lily reached out to touch the pup's paw, her fingers shaking. "Then he's the last piece of them both." Jack swallowed hard, feeling a ghost of the past rise up in him. Sand, sun, radio static, the old rhythm of orders and loss. He'd seen Marines carry dog tags and pictures through fire, believing small things could anchor a soul. Maybe they were right. Sarah printed the chip data and handed Jack the slip. "You should keep this. It's a part of his story now." He folded it carefully and slid it into his wallet beside his own Marine ID faded from years of sweat and salt. Lily's eyes followed the motion. "You were one too," she said quietly. "A Marine." Jack met her gaze. "A long time ago." She studied him for a moment, then said, "Then maybe Dad sent you to find us." Jack smiled faintly, but his voice carried the weight of belief. Maybe he did. Outside, rain began again, thin and steady. Jack helped Sarah return Shadow to his pen, where the pup curled up, eyes soft tail twitching once in comfort. Lily knelt by the glass, whispering, "You're not just my Shadow anymore. You're his too." Jack stood behind her, watching the two small figures, girl and dog, reclaiming pieces of a life that war had taken. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Healing never was. But for the first time in years, he felt the faint pulse of purpose beneath the silence. That evening, as Jack prepared to leave, Sarah caught him at the door. "You know what this means, don't you?" she asked quietly. "These two were meant to find you." Jack glanced back toward the observation window where Lily sat keeping vigil beside Shadow's crate. "Yeah," he said softly, "and I was meant to stay." The days at Paw Haven fell into a quiet rhythm of healing. Morning light filtered through the long windows, warming the kennels, and every sound seemed smaller, gentler than the chaos that had brought them all there. Lily spent hours reading aloud to Shadow from a torn paperback she'd found in the shelter's small library. her voice soft, uncertain but steady. The pup still flinched at sudden noises, still slept with one paw twitching, but he no longer turned away when Lily spoke. Jack visited daily, checking in on them both. He told himself it was part of the job, a matter of paperwork and duty, but he knew better. It was something quieter, something that pulled him back, no matter how many times he promised himself he'd let the shelter staff handle it. One afternoon, a low hum rolled across the sky. The sound came first as a distant vibration, then built into the unmistakable thrum of rotor blades. A Coast Guard helicopter passed low over the tree line, its red belly flashing through the clouds as it returned from a coastal rescue. In an instant, Shadow went rigid. His ears pinned back, and he scrambled into the farthest corner of the pen, whining sharply. The change was immediate and violent, a return to some memory that had no words. The metal bowls rattled as he pressed himself against the wall. Lily gasped, rushing forward. "Shadow, it's just a plane." But Jack froze where he stood, the sound hitting him like a ghost from another life. Afghanistan, summer heat, the smell of burnt sand and diesel, helicopter blades chopping air thick with dust, men shouting coordinates, then silence, then the crack of detonations rolling over the ridge. For a moment, Jack wasn't in Paw Haven. He was back there, his hands pressed against the ground, his radio screaming static. He blinked hard, breath caught in his chest, the years collapsing inward. Jack Lily's voice pulled him back. The helicopter noise faded into distance, swallowed by trees. Shadow still trembled, eyes wide, chest heaving. Jack exhaled slowly, knelt beside the pen, and spoke in the voice he'd used long ago to calm dogs under fire. "Easy, buddy. You're safe. It's gone now." His tone was low-grounded, steady as stone. Shadow's breathing slowed, though his body stayed taut, the memory still running through his blood. Lily knelt too, her hand hovering near the bars but not touching. "Why does he get so scared of that sound?" she whispered. Jack looked at her, the answer forming slowly. "Some noises stay with you," he said, "even after the danger's gone." Lily frowned. "Like yours?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe exactly like mine." That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep in the observation room, Jack sat alone in the shelter's small office, the glow of the computer screen lighting his face. Dr. Sarah Nolan had left a folder on the desk, the microchip data adoption records, and the Marine K9 registry she'd promised to dig up. Jack opened it, scanning through the lines of text and service codes. His own past stared back at him in government fonts and black ink. Camp Lejeune Division 2 Scout Service K9, active 2016-2021. He followed the entries, further tracing the sequence of updates. One note dated just months after Tom Adams' death caught his eye. Handler deceased during deployment. Dog retained for reassignment. Breeding authorization approved due to exceptional temperament. Whelped 1 litter 8 pups. Jack leaned back, heart tight. He found the next record. 1 pup transferred through unofficial channels to Adams family, Beaufort, North Carolina, courtesy of Sergeant Michael Crane. Jack recognized the name immediately. Crane had served beside him in Helmand, a broad-shouldered man who used to feed stray dogs outside the perimeter. He'd left the Corps 2 years before Jack did, saying he'd had enough of losing good men. Jack stared at the screen, piecing it together. After Tom Adams's death, Scout must have been kept at the base for reassignment. Crane must have arranged to deliver one of her pups to the Adams family, his way of giving them something alive to hold on to when everything else was gone. That pup was Shadow. Jack rubbed a hand across his face. The irony cut deep. The dog that carried the blood of Scout, the same Scout that had once served beside Tom, was now here trembling at the sound of the same helicopters that haunted Jack's dreams. Some things he thought refused to let you go until you faced them. He printed the report and folded it neatly into an envelope. The paper felt heavy, more like confession than record. He turned off the computer, the office light humming in the silence. Outside the quarantine window, Shadow lay curled asleep again. The tension in his body softened into uneasy rest. Lily, wrapped in a blanket, had fallen asleep too, her hand resting on the glass. Jack watched them for a long while before whispering, "Your dad and I served under the same sky, kiddo. Guess we're both still learning how to come home." As he stepped out into the night, the air was cool and damp. The world smelled of pine and rain and second chances. Above him, far away, another helicopter crossed the horizon, its lights blinking red against the dark. This time, Jack didn't flinch. He just listened until the sound faded completely. He knew what tomorrow would bring the truth, and with it, a choice about what to do with it. But tonight, standing under the Carolina stars, he let the silence fill him. For the first time in years, it didn't feel empty. It felt like grace. The morning after Jack uncovered the truth, Paw Haven seemed quieter than usual, as if even the wind had chosen to tread softly. Jack held the envelope with the printed report in his hand for a long time before walking into the observation room where Lily sat sketching Shadow in a small notebook. The puppy had healed enough to limp on his own, though his steps were still careful, his body cautious. Jack stood in the doorway, unsure how to begin. "Lily," he said gently, "I found something about your dad. About Shadow." She looked up, curiosity flickering before it tightened into guarded silence. Jack knelt beside her and laid the envelope on the table. "Dr. Nolan helped me check the records. Shadow's Mother Scout, she served with your father's unit. Same base, same team." Lily blinked, confused. Dad's dog, Jack, nodded. After he didn't come home, Scout stayed with the Marines for a while. She had a litter. One of her pups was given to your family. That was Shadow." For a long moment, Lily said nothing. Her fingers tightened around the pencil until the tip snapped. "You mean she lived?" Jack hesitated. Scout did, yes. "For a while. But she retired later." Lily's eyes filled anger mixing with disbelief. "So the dog got to come home, but not my dad?" Her voice trembled sharp and breaking at once. "He saved people. He fought. And the dog, she just gets to live." Jack's throat went dry. "Lily, that's not what it means." "It's exactly what it means," she said, standing. "They saved the dog and forgot him." Shadow whimpered softly from his blanket, sensing the storm rising. Lily turned toward him, her face twisted in hurt. "You're her puppy. You got to live because she did. Because she came back." She stepped backward, voice shaking. "You shouldn't even be here." Jack rose slowly, his palms open. "Lily, none of this is your fault. Or his." But she backed away, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You don't understand. Everyone lies. They said Dad died a hero. They said he wasn't scared, but he didn't get to come back. You're just saying what they said." Her words hit him harder than she could have known. For a moment, Jack saw another girl in another hallway, a folded flag in her hands, an empty chair at the table. He took a step closer. "Lily, listen. What happened to your dad wasn't fair. But Scout didn't choose it, and neither did Shadow. They just survived. Sometimes that's all we can do." She shook her head, backing into the wall, her small fists clenched. "You sound just like them. People who tell stories so no one cries too much." She turned away, shoulders heaving. "People like you don't know what it's like to lose everything." The words cut deeper than she knew. Jack swallowed the air heavy in his chest. "I do," he said quietly. "More than you think." But she didn't look back. She brushed past him and ran down the corridor, leaving the echo of small footsteps that felt larger than the room could hold. Shadow whined again, uncertain, and limped after her. Jack crouched, stopping him with a hand to the chest. "Give her time," he whispered. "She needs to be angry before she can heal." The pup's ears flattened, his gaze fixed on the doorway where Lily had vanished. Jack stayed there for a long while, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence left behind. He remembered the times he'd blamed his own commanding officer, or God, or the sand itself for who never made it home. Grief needed somewhere to go. It often chose the wrong target. That evening, rain came again, soft at first, then heavier. The shelter's roof drummed with it a quiet heartbeat that no one answered. Jack found Lily in the dorm room the staff had given her, curled on the cot beneath a quilt that looked too large for her small frame. Shadow lay on the floor beside her bed, his nose tucked under his paw, waiting for permission to belong again. Jack stood in the doorway but didn't speak. The girl's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling. "You should go," she said, her voice hoarse. "You're just going to tell me everything's okay." "No," Jack said. "I'm just here to tell you it's not." She turned her head, slightly confused by his answer. "It's not okay that your dad's gone. It's not okay that the world sometimes saves the wrong ones first. But none of that's Shadow's fault. He's just what was left behind to love." Lily's lip trembled, but she said nothing. After a while, she pulled the blanket higher and turned her back to him. "I don't want to talk." "All right," Jack said quietly. "You don't have to." He glanced at Shadow, then nodded toward the cot. "You can stay, boy." The pup lifted his head, uncertain, until Lily whispered something too soft to catch. He rose, circled once, then settled beside her bed, his head resting near her hand. Jack watched from the doorway as the girl's shoulders eased her breathing, slowing with the rhythm of the dog's. He turned off the light and stood in the dark, listening. The storm outside softened into drizzle, and the sound of 2 steady breaths filled the silence. He left the door ajar when he walked away, letting the hallway light spill a thin line into the room. It glowed faintly across Shadow's fur and the edge of Lily's quilt, the way dawn sometimes touches the world before it's ready to wake. Jack leaned against the wall outside, rubbing his hands together as if to warm a cold he couldn't shake. He knew tomorrow would bring harder conversations, but for now, silence was the only bridge left standing between them. The storm came back without warning, rolling in from the Atlantic with a low, steady growl that made the windows tremble. The power flickered twice before the shelter's generator kicked on, bathing Paw Haven in a pale amber glow. Jack had stayed late that night to help Dr. Nolan reinforce the outer kennels. The rain came sideways, and the air smelled like metal and electricity. When they finished, Sarah headed home, leaving Jack to check on the quarantine wing. The dogs barked uneasily at every flash of lightning. He moved from cage to cage, murmuring to each animal voice steady, the way he used to talk to soldiers before deployment. But his body was tired and his mind was already sliding toward a place it had learned to avoid. He paused outside Shadow's pen. The pup was pacing, ears low, whining softly at the thunder. Jack crouched, whispering, "It's just noise, buddy. Just weather." But even as he said it, the next flash hit blinding white, followed by a crack that shook the building. The sound wasn't thunder anymore, not to Jack. It was the blast of a mortar round the sky, splitting the air, burning. His breath shortened. The kennels blurred. For a moment, the wet concrete beneath him became desert dust, and he heard voices, his unit shouting, then silence. His body locked. His hands began to shake. The world narrowed to the drumbeat in his chest. He tried to stand, but couldn't. His knees gave out and he dropped to the floor beside Shadow's cage, breathing fast, too fast. He pressed his palms to his temples, whispering, "Not now. Not again." But the storm outside roared like engines overhead. Jack curled forward, trembling. The rhythm of the thunder fell in sync with the phantom sound of rotor blades, the same that had haunted his sleep for years. Inside the pen, Shadow whined sharply, scratching at the door. The latch rattled once, then again. The dog had grown stronger, and the latch hadn't been secured tightly after the evening rounds. With one determined push, it clicked open. The small shepherd slipped through the gap, limping slightly but moving fast. He pressed himself against Jack's side, trembling in rhythm with him. Jack didn't notice at first. His eyes were closed, breath-shallow memories pulling him under. But then he felt it, a warm, steady weight against his ribs. Shadow's head nudged under his arm, forcing space for his body. The pup lay down close chest against Jack's, breathing hard. That contact broke through the haze. Jack's fingers found fur, damp and trembling but real. He took a slow, uneven breath. The world didn't stop spinning, but it slowed enough for him to hear his own heartbeat again echoed by the tiny heartbeat pressed against him. He whispered hoarsely, "You shouldn't be out, kid." Shadow's tail flicked once, the smallest answer. Jack let out a long breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know. You don't leave your post." A door creaked open down the hall. Lily stood barefoot in the corridor, her hair, tangled eyes wide from the storm. She'd been woken by the thunder and had come looking for Jack. What she saw stopped her cold. The Marine, who had seemed unshakable, knelt on the floor, shaking like someone caught between worlds, and beside him the dog she'd blamed for everything lay still and loyal, his body curved protectively around the man's. Jack looked up when he felt her gaze. For a heartbeat, shame crossed his face, but then it was gone, replaced by exhaustion and a kind of quiet surrender. Lily stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You're scared too?" she asked. Jack swallowed, his voice rough. "Sometimes." She looked at Shadow, then back at him. He didn't run. Jack nodded. "No, he stays." The storm cracked again, but softer this time, or maybe it just felt that way. Lily knelt beside them, her small hand reaching toward Shadow's back. The dog turned his head and licked her wrist once, tentative but sure. Lily's eyes filled not with anger this time, but with something deeper understanding. "Dad didn't run either," she whispered. "He stayed." Jack closed his eyes, letting her words hang in the air. Outside, the wind began to ease. The thunder rolled farther away, leaving the rain to whisper against the roof. Shadow's breathing slowed until it matched Jack's. Lily sat beside them both, silent, her hand resting on the pup's fur. In that fragile calm, 3 broken rhythms found the same pace. When the storm finally passed, Jack eased himself up, leaning against the wall. His shirt clung to his skin, his pulse still unsteady. "Sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. Lily shook her head. "I'm not." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I get it now. He's like you." Jack frowned softly. "How's that?" "He doesn't leave people behind," she said. The words settled between them, simple and true. Jack reached out, resting a hand on Shadow's head. "Neither did your dad," he said. Lily nodded. The lightning flickered one last time outside, dim and harmless now. Later, Jack carried Shadow back to his pen, though the pup protested softly. Lily followed close behind, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. When Jack closed the latch, she said, "Can I stay here tonight?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. I'll grab a chair." She shook her head. "You don't have to. He's got us." Jack smiled faintly, weariness and gratitude in the same breath. "Yeah," he said. "He does." He turned off the overhead lights, leaving the room bathed in the soft orange glow of the emergency bulb. Outside, dawn began to break, painting faint gold over the wet glass. Inside, the man, the child, and the dog rested, not healed, not yet, but together. Morning sunlight spilled through the cracked blinds of the shelter's training room, cutting across the mats where Shadow stood on unsteady legs. His fur had grown thicker, the wounds nearly healed. Lily sat cross-legged a few feet away, her hair tied up with a piece of string, a smile flickering at the corners of her mouth as Jack held out his hand. "All right, Jack," said his voice calm but firm. "We start with the basics. Stay." He took one step back. Shadow's ears twitched, but he held still, tail quivering. "Good," Jack murmured. "That's how you build trust. You wait for the other to come to you." Lily giggled softly. "You sound like my dad when he tried to teach me to ride a bike." Jack smiled. "Same lesson. Don't rush the fall, just learn the balance." He gestured again. "Come." Shadow hesitated, then padded forward, nose twitching at the scent of treats in Jack's pocket. "Easy," Jack said, lowering his hand. "Gentle." The pup obeyed, touching his nose to Jack's palm. Lily clapped her hands, the sound ringing bright against the quiet. "He's learning fast. He's learning to listen," Jack corrected gently. "That's harder than it looks." Over the next few weeks, the three of them settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for training commands, trust exercises, and walks along the wet paths behind the shelter. Afternoons belonged to paperwork checkups and quiet moments where Lily would nap in the observation room while Shadow slept curled at her feet. Sometimes Jack joined them, sitting in the doorway with coffee, pretending to read reports while watching them breathe in sync. He hadn't known peace could look like that, small, fragile, and temporary. One Saturday, Jack brought Lily and Shadow to the open yard behind Paw Haven. The air smelled of grass and fresh-cut wood. "We'll try off-leash today," he said. Lily bit her lip. "What if he runs?" Jack knelt beside her. "Then we call him back. The trick isn't making him stay, it's making him want to." She nodded, trusting his certainty. He gave the command, "Stay." Shadow froze, eyes locked on them. Jack stepped back, then motioned to Lily. "Now call him." Her voice came out shy at first. "Shadow, come." The pup bounded toward her, almost tripping over his own paws. She laughed and caught him in her arms. The sound made Jack smile, an ache of pride blooming quietly in his chest. That afternoon, while they rested in the staff kitchen, a woman with a camera around her neck appeared at the door. Her hair was tied in a neat ponytail, her smile practiced. "Deputy Jack Carter," she asked. "Megan Holt, Wilmington Gazette. We're doing a story on post-disaster rescue efforts. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Jack hesitated. "We're kinda busy." She laughed lightly. "Just human interest, promise. The community loves stories like this. Marine rescues orphaned girl and her dog from the storm. It writes itself." Jack exchanged a wary glance with Dr. Nolan, who shrugged. 15 minutes, she said. The interview started simple, how they met, what the rescue was like, but when the reporter's eyes drifted to the sleeping child and the puppy at her feet, something sharpened behind her expression. "She's staying with you?" she asked casually. Jack nodded. "Temporarily. And the dog?" "He's under evaluation. We're keeping them together for now." Megan's smile faded into something analytical. "That's not standard shelter policy, is it?" "I signed the forms," Jack said. "Everything's handled." But her tone had shifted. Still, she said off the record, the readers love a story about bending rules for the right reasons. She snapped a picture before he could stop her. Lily resting her head on Shadow's side, sunlight cutting across both of them. "Beautiful," she murmured, and left. Jack didn't think much of it until Monday morning when Dr. Nolan burst into his office holding a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Storm Hero Defies Protocol to Shelter Orphaned Girl and Dog." Below it, a photo Lily and Shadow with Jack's badge glinting faintly in the background. "You made the front page," Sarah said grimly. "The Department of Family Services called twice already. They want clarification." By noon, an official car pulled into the lot. Two representatives stepped out, a man in a gray suit and a woman carrying a clipboard. Their words were polite but heavy with authority. "Deputy Carter, we appreciate your compassion, but this arrangement isn't legal. The girl has no registered guardian. The animal's under military property review. They both need to be relocated for proper care." Lily overheard everything from the hallway. Her face went pale. "You're taking us away?" she asked. The woman hesitated. "It's just temporary, sweetheart." But the word temporary broke something inside her. Shadow barked once, a sharp protest. Jack stepped forward. "You'll have to go through me first." The man in the suit adjusted his tie. "Then you'll be suspended pending investigation." Dr. Nolan stepped between them. "They've both been through enough," she said. But policy was policy. The woman handed Jack a notice. "We'll be back tomorrow morning." That night the shelter felt different, too. Quiet, too aware of its own walls. Lily sat on the cot, her arms wrapped around Shadow, eyes red from crying. Jack knelt beside her. "We'll figure something out," he said. "I promise." She looked up at him, her voice small. "They can't take him. Not again." Jack swallowed hard. "They won't," he said, though the words felt thin against the weight of what he knew. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving only the rustle of the pines. Inside, 3 lives waited for morning, knowing the peace they'd built was about to be tested. Rain began falling again that evening, slow and steady, at first the kind that painted the windows silver. Jack sat in his office, staring at the official notice still folded on the desk. It said everything in sterile words: transfer scheduled at 9 a.m., and nothing about what it would do to a child who'd already lost everything. The generator hummed in the background, the smell of disinfectant mixing with the faint warmth of coffee. He rubbed his forehead, exhausted but restless. Across the hall, Lily and Shadow were asleep in the dorm room, or so he thought. At 1 a.m., the storm thickened. The lights flickered twice. A muffled creak came from the corridor, the kind of sound only someone small could make. Shadow padded quietly beside Lily, his collar jingling softly. The girl carried a backpack half her size, a flashlight beam trembling across the walls. She'd waited until Jack's footsteps stopped and the shelter fell silent. She whispered to Shadow, "We're going home." The pup tilted his head but followed without hesitation. Outside, the rain hit cold and hard. Lily's breath came in small clouds as she crossed the gravel lot boots, sinking in mud. She remembered the route from earlier walks with Jack, the road leading to the old dam where a memorial stone stood for fallen service members. Her father's name was carved there, Tom Adams, USMC. She'd only seen it once before, too young then to read all the letters. Now she needed to. "They're not taking you away," she murmured to Shadow. "We'll be with him instead." By the time Jack woke, dawn hadn't broken yet. He noticed the empty cot first, then the leash hanging by the door. Panic cut through the fog in his mind. "Lily." His voice echoed off the walls. Dr. Nolan appeared in the hallway robe thrown over her scrubs. "What's wrong?" "She's gone," he said. She took the dog. Sarah's face paled. "Not in this weather." Jack grabbed his jacket and flashlight. "Call it in. I'll find them." The storm was fierce now, the kind that swallowed sound. The road twisted through low ground water, pooling in every ditch. Jack's truck headlights carved narrow tunnels through the rain. He kept replaying her words from the night before. "They can't take him. Not again." His stomach turned. He knew where she'd go. At the dam, the world had narrowed to gray and water. The spillway roared like an open throat. Lily stood near the memorial stone, soaked through her hair, plastered to her face. The flashlight flickered in her shaking hand. She knelt beside the stone, tracing her father's name with her fingers. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I couldn't let them take him." He's all I have left. Shadow barked once, nervous. The ground trembled faintly beneath them, a deep vibration that came from somewhere below the floodgate. Jack's truck skidded to a halt 100 yards away. He leapt out, shouting against the rain. "Lily! Get back from there!" She turned, startled eyes wide. "You can't make me go. I'm not here to take you anywhere," he shouted. "I'm here to bring you home." But before he could reach her, the dam gave a low, cracking sound that silenced everything. The water surged higher, spilling over the edge, the current twisting debris like branches and fence posts. Shadow barked again, short urgent. Then the bank gave way beneath Lily's boots. She slipped with a cry, hitting the water hard. Jack ran, heart hammering, but the current was faster. Shadow dove after her, the small shepherd cutting through the dark water with desperate strokes. Shadow Jack shouted, wading in the cold, biting through his uniform. The flashlight beam swung wildly, catching flashes of movement. Lily's hand. Shadow's back, the swirl of brown water. He reached the edge of the lower spillway, chest deep now. "Lily!" He yelled again. Her head broke the surface for a moment, her mouth gasping for air. Shadow was beside her, pushing against her shoulder, trying to keep her up. A large branch swept down the current and caught the dog across the hind leg, pinning him against the rocks. Lily screamed his name, thrashing. Shadow barked once high and pained, but didn't stop pushing her toward the shallower edge. Jack dove forward, catching Lily's arm. The current nearly tore her free, but he braced against the rock wall, hauling her close. "I've got you," he said, his voice raw. She clung to him, crying. "He's stuck," she sobbed. "Shadow's stuck." Jack turned flashlight beam, catching the small shape struggling against the current, the branch pressing his flank. "Hang on," Jack shouted. He pulled Lily to the higher bank, pushing her toward the grass. "Stay there." He plunged back into the water, the rain blinding him, the sound of the dam groaning above. When he reached Shadow, the pup was barely moving his chest, heaving water rushing over his muzzle. Jack shoved the branch with both hands, muscles burning. It didn't budge. He wedged his shoulder under it, straining until it lifted just enough for Shadow to twist free. The pup collapsed against him, coughing water. Jack gathered him up, one arm around his body, and stumbled toward the bank. Behind him, another rumble echoed the sound of the dam's outer layer beginning to crack. He reached the edge, pushing Shadow into Lily's waiting arms. "Hold him," he gasped. The three of them fell onto the wet grass just as the dam's overflow burst in full a roar like the sky breaking. Water rushed past them in a torrent, spraying cold mist into the air. Jack wrapped his arms around both of them, shielding their heads until the noise faded. When it was over, the rain slowed to a whisper. Lily pressed her face into Shadow's fur, sobbing softly. The pup shivered but licked her cheek eyes half open. Jack sat beside them, his chest heaving, the mud caking his hands. He looked at the broken dam, then at the small trembling figures beside him. "You're safe," he said, more to himself than anyone else. The distant wail of sirens began to rise over the hills. He exhaled, holding them tighter as dawn began to break through the rain. The rain had finally quieted, leaving behind the sound of running water and the faint creak of trees bending under the weight of it all. The flood had torn through the lower banks, turning the ground to thick black mud. Jack lay in it half-conscious, his breathing shallow. Lily knelt beside him, her small hands shaking as she tried to cover him with his jacket. "He's cold," she whispered to Shadow, who stood trembling beside her. The dog's fur was soaked through his sides, heaving from exhaustion. Jack's lips were pale, his voice barely audible. "You both safe." Lily nodded, tears cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. "We're okay. Please don't sleep." His eyes flickered open, once soft and far away. "You're brave," he murmured before slipping into silence. Lily pressed her ear against his chest until she found the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. She looked around, but the road was gone. The trucks couldn't have reached them through the flood. Shadow barked once, low and uncertain. Lily took a trembling breath. "Stay with him," she said, voice breaking. The pup circled once, then lay down, pressing his body along Jack's chest. His fur was wet, but his warmth spread through the soaked uniform. Every few seconds he nudged Jack's face with his nose as if urging him to stay awake. Hours crawled by. The storm had passed, but the cold remained. Lily sat close, wrapping her arms around both of them, whispering prayers she half remembered from her father. "Please, God, don't take him too." Jack's breathing stayed shallow but steady, the faint fog of his breath barely visible in the dim dawn light. Shadow never moved, his heartbeat matching Jack's slow rhythm, a tether holding him to the world. When the first rescue crew arrived near sunrise, they found the three of them huddled together beneath a broken tree limb. "We've got survivors," one rescuer shouted. They rushed forward with blankets and stretchers. A paramedic knelt beside Jack, pressing fingers to his neck. "Weak pulse," he said. "Severe hypothermia." He glanced at the small shepherd pressed tight against the man's chest. Dog probably saved him. Lily held on to Shadow's collar as they loaded Jack onto the stretcher. "He won't leave him," she said firmly. The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. "All right, kid. He comes too." At the hospital, the hallways buzzed with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Jack lay under heated blankets, an IV line running down his arm. Lily sat outside the room, still wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt, Shadow's head resting on her lap. She hadn't let him out of her sight since they were brought in. Dr. Nolan arrived later that morning, her face drawn with both worry and relief. "You scared half the county," she said softly, crouching beside Lily. "But you did good." Lily's eyes lifted. "Is he going to be okay?" "He will be," Sarah said. "Thanks to you and him." She glanced at Shadow, who thumped his tail once as if understanding. News traveled fast in a town like Wilmington. By noon, a reporter from the Gazette stood in the waiting area. Megan Holt, again her notebook-ready camera slung over her shoulder. "The hospital says the Marine saved a girl and her dog from the flood," she said gently. "I'd like to hear it from you, sweetheart. What happened out there?" Lily hesitated, clutching Shadow closer. "He found me," she began. "And when the water came, he didn't leave. He carried me out even when he couldn't breathe." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "He almost died because of us. But he wouldn't let go." Megan nodded, writing fast. "And the dog Shadow kept him warm all night," Lily said. "He stayed so he wouldn't be alone." Her voice grew soft, steady. "That's what my dad used to say, Marines don't leave anyone behind. Mr. Jack didn't either." By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Marine rescues child saved by her dog. The town rallied around them. Messages poured in food deliveries to the hospital flowers cards from veterans who'd served with Tom Adams, and a handwritten letter from the mayor himself. "Your service didn't end overseas, Sergeant. It continued here." When Jack finally woke, the room was bright with winter sun. His throat felt dry, but his first word was clear. "Lily." She was already there, sitting in the chair beside him. Shadow curled on the floor. She smiled, eyes shining. "We're right here." He blinked, the memory returning slowly. The flood, the cold, her face. "You're safe," he said hoarsely. "Because of you," she whispered. "And because of him." Dr. Nolan entered, smiling. "You've got a fan club waiting downstairs. The whole town's talking about you." Jack frowned, still dazed. About what Sarah handed him a newspaper. The front page showed a photograph, him unconscious, Lily clinging to his sleeve. Shadow pressed against his chest. The headline read, "He didn't leave anyone behind." Jack stared at it for a long time before looking up. "I was supposed to be suspended." Sarah shrugged. "You were." Then they changed their mind. Public pressure community petition, a few phone calls from veterans. Let's just say you're reinstated and commended. Later that afternoon, he was moved to a recovery room with a window facing the pines. Lily brought him a cup of hospital cocoa and climbed onto the chair beside his bed. You kept your promise, she said softly. You brought us home. He smiled faintly, his hand resting over hers. Maybe you brought me home too. Outside, the last of the floodwater shimmered under the sun. Inside, the three of them sat quietly. The silence warm this time, no longer made of fear. Shadow lifted his head, tail flicking once, and settled again, his body pressed close to the man he'd saved. Spring came slow to Wilmington that year. The river ran high from snowmelt, the pines dripped with morning dew, and the scent of salt carried inland on the breeze. The town had rebuilt piece by piece houses, repaired fences, mended, and hearts stitched back together with quiet acts of kindness. Paw Haven no longer smelled only of bleach and loss. It smelled of new beginnings. Jack stood in the training field behind the shelter, his voice calm and even as he called out commands. Stay. Come. Easy. The words had once been for Shadow alone, but now they echoed across a field full of eager volunteers and young handlers. Among them stood Lily, taller, surer, a bright red windbreaker hanging loose on her small frame. Beside her, Shadow, no longer the trembling pup from the storm, sat alert, muscles strong beneath his sleek coat, a service vest shining dark blue across his back. The patch stitched on the side read, Therapy and Rescue Unit 3. Shadow. Jack smiled faintly, adjusting the brim of his cap. All right, partners, he called, let's show them what trust looks like. Lily turned to Shadow, her tone gentle but firm. Search. The shepherd leapt forward, nose low, weaving between cones and over ramps in smooth rhythm. That's it, Jack murmured. Steady. When Shadow circled back, Lily knelt to meet him, hands on his shoulders, pride lighting her face. You did it, boy. The crowd of volunteers clapped softly, some wiping away quiet tears. By summer, Shadow had become a certified therapy and rescue dog, the kind that could calm shaking hands in hospitals or crawl through rubble when others couldn't. Lily became his official handler, her name appearing beside his on the county rescue roster. Jack signed the documents with a slow, steady hand, the ink smudging slightly from the weight of it all. Guess we're teammates now, he said with a grin. Officially. Lily laughed. You mean we weren't before? He looked down at Shadow, who wagged his tail in answer. Guess we always were. Their days settled into a rhythm that felt like purpose. Mornings began at the shelter. Afternoons were spent visiting recovery centers where Shadow lay patiently beside wounded veterans or frightened children. Jack watched each visit quietly, recognizing in those moments the same healing he'd once prayed for himself. He no longer flinched at loud noises. The ghosts in his mind had quieted, replaced by the soft sound of paws across tile and the laughter of a girl who'd learned to trust again. One gray afternoon in late September, the sky turned dark over Wilmington. A sudden storm swept in from the coast, lightning splitting the clouds. Jack was finishing a training report when the radio crackled to life. Unit 3, we've got a collapse on Maple Street, small structure, possible entrapment, 1 child missing. His hand stilled on the paper. Copy that, he said. We're on our way. He turned toward Lily, who was already clipping Shadow's harness. You sure you're ready? He asked. She nodded without hesitation. He's ready. We both are. By the time they reached the site, rain poured hard enough to blur the outlines of the rescue trucks. A small house had buckled under a fallen oak, the yard littered with broken beams. A woman stood crying near the curb, calling a name, Eli. Please, my baby. Jack guided Lily forward. Stay close to the crew, he said. Don't move until they give the signal. The fire captain waved them in. Kids somewhere under the east wall. He shouted over the rain. We can't reach him, too unstable. Jack looked at Lily. You know what to do. Lily crouched beside Shadow rain dripping from her hood. Search, she said softly. The shepherd darted into the debris, his movement fluid, precise. The world seemed to narrow to the sound of claws scraping wood and the rhythm of his bark, one short, one long. He's got something, Jack said, his heart kicking. Shadow nosed through the wreckage, pawing at a small pocket of space beneath a collapsed beam. A faint whimper came from inside. He's alive, Lily called out. The rescue team moved in with care, cutting through the boards. Jack steadied the flashlight as hands worked fast. When they pulled the boy free, muddy and crying, but breathing, the whole street seemed to exhale. The woman ran forward, collapsing to her knees beside her son. Lily knelt too, her hand resting on Shadow's back. The dog leaned into her, panting but calm, eyes bright despite the rain. Jack stood a few feet away, rainwater dripping from his jacket, his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. Pride, relief, maybe peace. He watched the two figures in the downpour, the girl and the dog who'd once faced the wall, now standing in the open, facing the storm head-on. When the paramedics loaded the boy into the ambulance, the captain turned to Jack. Good work, Marine. You trained them well. Jack shook his head. They trained me. The man smiled, not pressing the point. As the rain softened, Lily walked over to him, her hair plastered to her forehead. Shadow pressed close to her leg. We did it, she said quietly. Jack nodded. You did more than that. He glanced at the ruins behind them. You reminded me why we keep showing up. She smiled through the rain. Because we don't leave anyone behind. He looked at her, the girl who had once hidden from the world, and at the dog who had once been too afraid to lift his head. Both of them stood tall now, eyes steady, hearts open. The storm passed over them, moving toward the sea. Jack breathed in the scent of wet pine and salt and thought of how far they had all come. As they walked back toward the truck, Shadow glanced up at him, tail swaying. Jack reached down, brushing his hand through the wet fur. Good boy, he said softly. Good soldier. And for the first time in years, he wasn't talking to the past. He was talking to the future. If this story touched you, if you believe courage still lives in quiet places, take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you true stories of healing, hope, and second chances. Tell me in the comments which part stayed with you the most. Was it the storm, the rescue, or the moment Shadow chose to stay? And where are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know how far this story travels.